hello, ladies. There are moments in life when someone enters your world, and without even trying, they change its rhythm. They don't just leave memories, they leave energy. And sometimes that energy refuses to fade, no matter how much time passes. You see, when his mind keeps returning to you, it isn't always about love. It's about impact. It's about the imprint you left on the parts of him that no one else ever reached. Maybe it was your silence, your calm, your chaos, or the way you understood him, when even he couldn't understand himself. People often think the heart forgets, but the truth is, the heart never forgets where it felt safe. And maybe, in your presence, he found a peace he can't recreate. Even if life moved forward, even if faces changed, the mind still goes back to the one place where it once found stillness. His thoughts return not because he wants to, but because they are drawn there. Like a compass finding north, his emotions find you, in the quiet hours, in the middle of his success, or in moments of loneliness. Your memory flickers like light through a half-open door. Maybe he replays what went wrong. Maybe he wonders what could have been. Or maybe deep down, he just misses the version of himself that existed when you were around, the part of him that smiled without reason, that believed without fear. This isn't obsession. It's connection, the kind that refuses to die quietly, because certain bonds aren't built on presents or promises, they're built on truth. And truth, no matter how far you run, always finds its way back. So when his mind keeps returning to you, it's not just memory, it's meaning. You were not just a chapter, you were a turning point, and even if the story moved on, the echo of your name still lives between the lines. There are people who pass through our lives like shadows, brief, unnoticed, and easily forgotten. And then, there are those who leave something behind that time can't erase. They don't just exist in your memory, they live in your pulse, in your thoughts, in the quiet spaces between heartbeats. When he met you, something inside him shifted. It wasn't loud or dramatic, it was quiet, almost invisible, but it was real. You left a mark, not on his mind alone, but on the way he feels life. Because some connections are not about the words exchanged, but about the energy shared. The kind that lingers, even after the conversation ends, even after distance grows. An emotional imprint isn't created by grand gestures. It's made in small moments, the way you looked at him when he wasn't speaking. The way you understood the silence that others found uncomfortable. The way your presence felt like peace after a storm. Those moments dig deeper than we realize. They become threads woven into the fabric of his thoughts. So even when he tries to pull them out, the pattern remains. He may meet others, talk, laugh, live, but that imprint, that subtle echo of what you once made him feel, it stays. It becomes part of who he is. Sometimes he won't even know why a song hits him differently, or why a scent in the air pulls his chest tighter. It's because pieces of you are still printed in the corners of his memory. What you gave him wasn't just affection. It was recognition, the rare kind that tells a soul, I see you. And once someone feels truly seen, truly understood, it becomes impossible to forget the one who gave them that clarity. That moment of belonging becomes a permanent scar, not one that hurts, but one that reminds him that once he mattered in someone's eyes in a way that words could never capture. And that's the thing about emotional imprints, they don't fade, they evolve. They grow quieter but deeper. They become part of the rhythm of thought, part of the reason behind sudden emotions he can't explain. Sometimes he'll sit in silence trying to name the feeling, but can't because the name isn't important. The presence is, the memory is, the emotion is. He doesn't keep returning because he chooses to. He returns because part of him still lives there, in the warmth of what once was, in the comfort of the unspoken understanding, in the stillness that only you could bring. There are things we say out loud, and then there are things that never find their way to words. Those are the ones that echo the longest. His mind keeps returning to you because of all the conversations that never happened, the truth swallowed, the feelings half spoken, the emotions that lingered between pauses. The silence between you became heavier than any argument, louder than any confession. He replays moments not to relive them, but to rewrite them, wishing he had said what his heart screamed in whispers. He remembers the times he stayed quiet when he should have spoken, and the times he spoke when he should have just listened. That's the cruelty of memory. It gives you the script only after the scene has ended. Maybe he thinks about the last time you spoke, the way your words trembled at the edges, the way his pride built walls faster than his love could climb them. Every time his mind drifts back, it's searching for a sentence left unfinished, for closure that never came. But closure doesn't always arrive as a moment. Sometimes it comes as a realization, one he still hasn't reached. Those unfinished conversations live like open doors in his memory. He stands at the threshold, wondering what would have happened if he'd stepped through instead of walking away. He imagines your responses, your laughter, your quiet sighs, because in his world now, those sounds exist only in imagination. You became the dialogue he keeps having with himself. Every question he asks in the quiet of night is one he once wanted to ask you. Every thought he hides behind strength is one that began in your presence. It's strange how silence can hold more weight than sound, how a goodbye left unsaid can echo louder than 1,000 words. He isn't haunted by regret alone, he's haunted by possibility. By the idea that if he had said what he truly felt, maybe the ending would have been different. Maybe the story would have gone on longer. Maybe the distance between you wouldn't feel this wide. And so, in the middle of conversations with others, his mind drifts not to the past, but to the space between your last words and his next breath. Because somewhere deep down, he still believes the dialogue isn't over. He still believes that somewhere, somehow, the words you both never spoke are waiting. There's a kind of comfort that doesn't come from words or presence. It comes from energy. A quiet knowing, the peace of being understood without having to explain yourself. That's what he found in you, not noise, not excitement, but a stillness that felt like home. Before you, comfort meant routine, predictable, ordinary, easy to control, but you changed the definition. You made comfort feel like connection, not convenience. You made it about being seen, not just being around. And once someone tastes that kind of peace, the kind that doesn't ask them to pretend, doesn't demand perfection, every other comfort feels artificial. That's why his mind keeps circling back. Because no matter where he goes, he can't recreate what he felt with you. There's always something missing: the warmth, the quiet understanding, the rhythm his heart found in your presence. He doesn't always realize it consciously, but somewhere beneath the noise of life, he's still searching for that same energy. You became his place of emotional safety. When the world was loud, you were the calm. When his thoughts were heavy, your presence made them lighter. You didn't fix him. You reminded him that he didn't always need fixing. Sometimes all he needed was to be, and you gave him that. Now, even in the company of others, he finds himself comparing not out of choice, but out of instinct. Because comfort isn't something you measure. It's something your soul recognizes, and his soul recognizes you. The way you listened, the way your silence never felt empty, the way your energy filled the space like warmth in winter. He remembers the small things, not the grand moments, the way the air felt when you were near, the ease in his breathing, the way time seemed to slow, not because the world stopped, but because for once it didn't need to rush. That kind of peace becomes addictive, not the kind that numbs, but the kind that heals. And maybe that's why every time he feels lost, every time life pulls him in different directions, his thoughts wander back not to the memories themselves, but to the feeling they carried. Because deep down, it's not you he's chasing. It's the version of himself that existed in your presence, the one that felt calm, centered, understood. You became his emotional anchor without even trying. A quiet constant in a world that never stays still. And even now, as he moves through new faces and new moments, there's a part of him that quietly whispers for that same familiarity. That same warmth that only one place ever gave him. There are things in this world that can't be explained by logic connections that defy distance, silence, and time. That's the power of energy. The invisible thread that still ties one heart to another, long after the words have stopped and the world has moved on. You see, energy doesn't obey the rules of separation. It lingers, it travels, it remembers. And when two souls have once shared something real, the energy between them doesn't simply vanish, it transforms. It becomes an echo, sometimes soft, sometimes overwhelming, but always there. That's why, even when you're miles apart, even when he tells himself it's over, something inside him still reacts when he thinks of you. Because your energy didn't just cross paths with his, it merged for a while. It became part of his emotional frequency, and though time may fade faces, it cannot silence vibration. There are nights when he feels a sudden restlessness for no reason. Mornings when a strange calm settles over him without warning. He doesn't always understand it, but it's that same energy, familiar, silent, unspoken brushing against his thoughts, like a memory carried by the wind. Energy doesn't lie. It carries intention, emotion, memory. It remembers laughter, it remembers pain, it remembers every heartbeat that once aligned with another. When two people connect deeply, that energy imprints like light on film. It captures not just what happened, but what was felt. And so, even when everything else fades, the words, the moments, the logic, the energy still hums beneath the surface, reminding him of something he can't name, but always recognizes. Maybe that's why sometimes, even in crowded rooms, he feels your presence not as a ghost, but as a vibration, a familiar pull in the air. Maybe that's why, in moments of quiet, he suddenly feels seen again, even when no one's watching. Because energy has memory, and it travels in silence, crossing oceans of time just to touch what it once knew. And perhaps that's the truth he doesn't say aloud, that no matter how far he runs, he's still moving within the field of what you once shared. That energy isn't something you leave behind, it's something you carry willingly or not. Because what you both created wasn't ordinary connection, it was resonance, and resonance doesn't fade easily. It vibrates in the spaces between thoughts, it lingers in unfinished dreams, it moves through him quietly, reminding him that not everything that's gone is truly gone. Memories fade, moments don't, because memories are built by the mind, but moments, they live in the soul. He doesn't remember everything that happened between you. He remembers the way it felt, the warmth in the air, the tone of your voice, the stillness in those seconds when time seemed to pause just to listen. That's what stays, not the details, not the dates, just the feeling. And that's the strange thing about human connection. We don't carry photographs in our minds, we carry sensations. He remembers how the world seemed softer when you were near. He remembers that strange calm, the one that made even ordinary moments feel sacred. The way silence between you didn't feel empty but full of meaning. He replays the little things, the halves, miles, the unplanned laughter, the quiet glances that spoke entire paragraphs. He doesn't even try to remember them. They just return on their own, like gentle waves bringing back pieces of something the tide once took away. It's never the big moments that hold him, not the milestones, not the goodbyes, it's the small ones that no one else would notice. The way your presence could fill a room without words. The way your energy softened his rough edges without trying to change him. That's what returns to him in flashes, moments that didn't ask to be remembered, but refused to be forgotten. Sometimes, in the middle of a busy day, a sound or a scent will pull him back into one of those moments, and for a second, the world blurs. It's not nostalgia he feels, it's something deeper, something wordless. A recognition that those moments were more than experiences, they were imprints of emotion. still alive somewhere inside him. He doesn't sit down to remember you, you just arrive, like sunlight slipping through the cracks of a closed window. You appear in fragments, a laugh, a silence, a shadow of a conversation, and he realizes it was never about holding on to the past. It was about how the past still breathes in certain corners of the present. Because what you gave him wasn't just time, it was presence. And presence, when real, leaves traces that can't be washed away by distance or reason. Some moments don't need to last forever to live forever. They exist beyond time, replaying themselves quietly whenever his heart slows down enough to listen. And maybe that's why, even after everything, his thoughts keep finding their way back not to the whole story, but to the fragments that still feel alive. The flickers of light in the middle of darkness, the seconds that felt like forever, the way your presence made the world feel aligned for just a heartbeat. Regret doesn't always arrive with thunder. Sometimes it comes quietly, slipping in through the same door that love once entered. He doesn't always know when it happens, maybe during long drives, or when the night is too silent for his thoughts to hide. But there it is, that quiet ache of if only he had listened more. If only he had stayed a little longer. If only he had understood what silence was trying to tell him before it became distance. Regret isn't about wanting to rewrite the past, it's about wishing he had been more present when it mattered. Because now, every memory feels like a mirror reflecting what he could have done differently. Every reflection shows him not just you, but the version of himself he lost when he lost you. He replays conversations in his mind not to torture himself, but to understand. To figure out where the laughter began to fade, where the understanding turned into confusion. Regret is the mind's way of trying to find closure in puzzles that no longer have all their pieces. Sometimes he tells himself that maybe things happened the way they were supposed to. But deep down, there's a part of him that still questions, what if he hadn't walked away so easily? What if pride hadn't spoken louder than truth? What if silence hadn't become the language of goodbye? And it's in those moments of reflection that he realizes something, that regret isn't only about losing someone. It's about realizing how deeply they mattered after they're gone. How rare it was to be seen like that. How fragile that kind of connection really is. He's learned that you don't always recognize your turning points while you're living them. Sometimes you only see them when they've already turned, when you're standing on the other side, looking back at what slipped through your fingers. And yet, reflection has its own kind of beauty because it teaches him humility. It makes him see that love isn't about holding on, it's about understanding why it mattered. That the pain of losing something real isn't punishment. It's a reminder that he once had something worth missing. There's a strange comfort in regret, too, because it means he felt deeply. It means something within him was moved enough to care, enough to remember, enough to wonder. Regret, in its quiet way, is proof that the story left a mark not just on him, but within him. And so, even now, as he reflects, it's not bitterness that fills him. It's a kind of quiet gratitude mixed with sorrow. A recognition that sometimes the most valuable lessons come wrapped in loss. That sometimes you don't truly understand love until you're looking at its absence. He sits with those thoughts not to escape them, but to understand them. Because maybe understanding is the only way to make peace with what can't be changed. Maybe the point of reflection isn't to go back, but to learn how to live with the echoes that never completely fade. Silence has a language of its own, one that speaks louder than words ever could. He once thought silence meant peace, but after you, he learned it could also mean presence, the kind that lingers long after sound has faded. When everything between you fell quiet, he didn't realize that the quiet itself would become its own kind of conversation. Because silence doesn't erase, it amplifies. It takes what's unspoken and turns it into something he feels in the pit of his chest. Now, in the stillness of certain nights, when there's nothing left to distract him, he can almost hear that silence again, not as emptiness, but as an echo. The same stillness that once comforted him now feels like a mirror reflecting everything left unsaid. The words he didn't speak, the apologies he never gave, the truths he buried beneath pride, they all echo back in that hollow space where your voice used to be. It's strange how silence can hold so much sound, how it can remember laughter, remember tears, remember the exact tone of your calm. Sometimes he swears he can still hear your presence in the quiet, not your words, but your essence. That gentle calm that used to settle the storms inside him without even trying. He's learned that silence isn't absence, it's memory in disguise. It's the space where all the emotions go when there's no one left to feel them with. And in those moments when the world slows down, he can hear it all, the rhythm of what was, the pulse of connection that refuses to die quietly. You taught him that not all communication happens through words. That sometimes two souls can sit in complete stillness and still understand everything. And maybe that's what haunts him most, that your silence once brought comfort, but now it brings reflection, that the same quiet that once meant closeness now means distance. He's beginning to understand that silence is eternal. It never really ends, it just changes tone. Sometimes it whispers, sometimes it roars, sometimes it feels gentle, like a memory brushing past. Other times, it hits like a wave, reminding him that peace and pain can coexist inside the same stillness. Because the truth is, silence never really leaves once it's shared deeply. It becomes part of you, part of the rhythm of thought. It hums softly beneath every moment of calm, like a hidden chord in the background of his life. He doesn't run from it anymore, he listens to it. Because inside that silence, he still hears what words could never hold, the presence of something that was real, something that still breathes quietly in the spaces where sound refuses to go. Some connections don't break, they bend the air around them. They create a pull, quiet but constant, a kind of emotional gravity. He doesn't choose to think of you. He simply finds himself orbiting back, the way the moon keeps circling the earth even when it wishes to drift away. That's what gravity does. It reminds what's been touched by a force too real to ignore where home once was. You became that pull, the invisible center that shaped his thoughts even when distance tried to scatter them. He tells himself he's moved on, that time has dulled the edge, but then without warning a memory drifts by and the pull returns. Not loud, not dramatic, but certain, like a heartbeat beneath silence. Emotional gravity isn't about weakness, it's about imprint. You don't decide who becomes your center, the heart does that for you. And once it does, every motion afterward is just a slow dance of resistance and surrender. He resists remembering, but his heart keeps orbiting. He resists feeling, but his energy keeps reaching. He feels it in moments he least expects, standing in a crowd, hearing a song he doesn't even like, catching the scent of something faintly familiar. It's not memory, it's magnetism, something deep inside him responding to something deep inside you, even if neither of you are there. He's tried to bury it under logic, under time, under new faces. But gravity doesn't care for logic. It doesn't fade with distance or change with circumstance. It simply is. The invisible thread tugging softly, reminding him that once there was alignment, a pull so natural that he didn't have to think, he just felt. And maybe that's what unsettles him the most, that no matter how much life changes, the pull never fully disappears. It grows quieter, subtler, but it never stops working beneath the surface. It draws him back, not always to you, but to what he became when he was with you, the lighter, more open version of himself. Sometimes he wonders if you feel it too. That unspoken tug, that sudden ache that doesn't belong to the present. Maybe in some hidden corner of the universe, the energy between you still hums softly, holding both your names in its orbit. Because emotional gravity isn't about possession, it's about remembrance. It's about the way certain souls mark each other so deeply that even when they drift apart, the pull remains, guiding them in invisible circles back to the same thought, the same heartbeat, the same silent awareness that something still exists. Pain has a strange way of becoming a teacher. At first, it arrives like a storm, loud, uninvited, relentless, but with time it softens into rain, washing away what the heart can no longer carry. He didn't know it then, but every ache he felt after you left was shaping him. Every sleepless night, every quiet morning where the world felt hollow, it was all chiseling something new inside him. Because growth doesn't happen in comfort, it happens in the breaking. It happens when the heart has no choice but to rebuild itself differently. You became the mirror he never asked for. Through loss, he began to see the cracks in his own reflection, the pride that spoke too loudly, the fears that kept him distant, the softness he had forgotten he even possessed. Pain turned into perspective. What once felt like punishment became understanding. He started noticing things he had overlooked before: the value of gentle words, the strength in vulnerability, the courage it takes to truly care. Each piece of pain revealed a lesson hidden beneath it. Every wound whispered something: feel deeper, listen better, love slower. There were moments he wished he could erase it, all the memories, the emotions, the weight of it. But without them, he wouldn't have discovered what it means to truly grow. Growth isn't about forgetting, it's about transforming. It's taking what broke you and using it to build something stronger, something wiser, something quieter. He learned that healing isn't linear. Some days he moved forward, other days he stumbled back. But even in the backward steps, there was movement, because even falling is part of the dance of becoming. Pain, he realized, doesn't end when it stops hurting. It ends when it starts teaching. And maybe that's why, even though you're gone, he's grateful in a quiet way. Because through the ache, he found a deeper version of himself, one that feels more, understands more, forgives more. You became the chapter that taught him how to turn the page. He no longer runs from the ache, he lets it breathe beside him, because in every heartbeat that still remembers, there's evidence of growth, evidence that love, even when lost, leaves behind something worth keeping. And somewhere between the sorrow and the strength, he begins to realize that the pain itself was never the end, it was the bridge leading him toward who he was always meant to become. There are ties you can see, hands held, promises spoken, names written in messages that fade with time. And then there are the unseen bonds, the ones that live beneath the skin, inside the rhythm of thought, woven quietly between two souls that once recognized each other. He doesn't talk about it, because how do you explain something you can't define? This connection doesn't exist in the world's language. It's not visible, not measurable, yet it's there like gravity, like heartbeat, like breath. Something he feels without permission, something he can't silence even when he tries. The unseen bond doesn't demand presence, it survives on remembrance. It's in the way a thought of you can soften his anger. It's in how your name still steadies his pulse before he even realizes it. It's in the calm that sometimes finds him for no reason, the calm that feels too familiar to come from nowhere. He's learned that energy doesn't break. It bends, it moves, it transforms, but it never ends. And maybe that's why he still senses you in moments that have nothing to do with the past. Because the bond between souls isn't about togetherness, it's about recognition. It's about two energies that once found each other and left fingerprints on each other's existence. It's in the timing of his thoughts, how he feels something before it happens, how a song plays at the exact moment your memory crosses his mind. Coincidence? Maybe, but he's stopped believing in coincidence where you're concerned. Some connections are too precise, too alive to be accidents. He doesn't reach for you anymore, yet you remain within reach. like an echo that doesn't need sound to be heard, like warmth that lingers after the fire's gone. You exist in the spaces between his breaths, in the pauses between his words, in the invisible thread that connects what was with what still is. He's beginning to understand that not every bond was meant to be lived, some were meant to be felt. Some are written in the invisible ink of emotion, glowing only when the heart remembers. You became that kind of bond, the quiet constant that time forgot to erase. He can walk miles, change cities, outgrow versions of himself, and still, something unspoken pulls softly beneath it all. It's not longing anymore. It's not pain. It's recognition. It's the quiet knowing that what once existed still vibrates somewhere in the universe. Maybe that's the secret of the unseen bond. It doesn't need validation or return. It simply exists, like a note that keeps ringing long after the song has ended. It hums softly beneath the noise of his days, reminding him that connection doesn't die. It only changes form. And even now, in the quiet moments when everything feels still, when the world pauses just long enough for truth to surface, he can feel it again. Faint but certain, the pull of something wordless, shapeless, endless. Something that refuses to fade, something that still breathes quietly in the space between what was and what will never quite let go. And maybe that's the truth he was meant to find all along, that some connections don't fade, they evolve. Some stories don't end, they just learn to exist in silence. His mind doesn't return because he's trapped in the past. It returns because a part of his soul recognizes something real, something that shaped him, challenged him, changed him. He's no longer searching for what was. He's learning to honor what it gave him, the lessons, the ache, the beauty of feeling something deeply enough to still remember. Because memory isn't always a wound. Sometimes it's proof that he lived. And so when his mind drifts back, he doesn't fight it anymore. He lets it visit softly like an old friend. Because he knows now the heart doesn't return to what's gone. It returns to what still matters. And maybe that's why his mind keeps returning to you.